Hey! Did I miss anything? What the... Ugh.
Hello everyone, I have returned and a lot has changed since the last time you saw me here on YouTube. For one thing, I'm married. That's crazy. And there's a lot that's changing in my life because of it. We're currently looking for a house. We're also planning on having children. That's something that might be coming up soon, hopefully, fingers crossed. And we adopted a dog. We started off fostering this cute little thing. Her name is Tori. And my wife just fell head over heels in love with her, so we ended up adopting her. She's 10 years old, came from a family that raised her for 10 years, and they left her in a shelter because they couldn't take her with them. I don't know all the circumstances, but it was very strange. But their loss is our gain, and she is a sweet, wonderful, albeit very strange dog at times. She's very picky about her food. Like, there are times where I'll feed her breakfast, and she straight up won't touch it, but then 10 minutes later, I'll catch her nosing through the trash. I don't understand it, but hey, she's a dog. She's going to do what she wants to do, I guess. But, yeah, a lot of crazy stuff going on. Had my honeymoon. We went to Mexico. We went to the Xcaret resort and all of the parks associated with it, like Explore and Excenses, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, to be perfectly honest. I think my favorite was probably Savage. Cenotes was also pretty cool, the sinkhole one. I really enjoyed that. We did kayaking, we did an obstacle course, we did zip lining, we did a mud river, we did all kinds of crazy things. It was a wonderful, wonderful trip with a lot of first-time experiences for me. Word of advice, if you do go to Xcaret, or Mexico in general, number one, watch your head. I am not the tallest person in the world, but in Mexico, I felt like a giant. And if I wasn't watching my head, and if they didn't provide a helmet for some of the parks, I probably would have left the country of Mexico with a concussion. So watch your head, watch your step. The flooring is not always even, and it's very easy to trip and fall and break something, shall we say. So watch your step. Building off of that, water shoes, water shoes, water shoes. For the love of God, get water shoes. You won't regret it. They are lifesavers if you're down there using any of the parks. And my final piece of advice, this is practically common knowledge. If you get offered to sign up for some kind of a seminar, to join some kind of membership or anything, sounds very much like a timeshare type of deal. Say no, say no, say no. For the love of God, say no. My wife and I got offered it when we first checked in at the resort. And she said yes, and I was kind of nudging her like, don't do it, don't do it. And even I thought, it's like, okay, hour and a half, they give us breakfast, we'll do our hour and a half, we'll be in and out of there, and I will bolt right out of there. Didn't turn out that way. It was actually like a one-on-one session with a salesperson, basically, and one other person that was there. And they kept us there for a lot longer than an hour and a half. And it got to a point where the only way we got out of there was we had to stop being polite. And that's all I will say in that regard. So if you get offered something like that, just don't sign up for it. Just don't. It's a waste of time, and you will feel like you're being held hostage by the end of it. It's not great. But that was the one downer of an otherwise fantastic honeymoon. And since I've been back, I've been trying to get caught up on a bunch of things, namely pro wrestling. WWE and AEW. Now, before I left, I did post a bunch of videos. I did basically a video dump because there was a bunch of stuff I wanted to get out before I got married, went on my honeymoon, and all that other fun stuff. And those videos, if you have not seen them, it's a reaction to the finale of Better Call Saul, and also my summarization of my feelings towards the entire show. My second heel or face video with Batista as the main subject. I should also note that I am working on my third heel or face video where the subject will be The Big Show, the Giant. The selections were former WCW World Heavyweight Champions. He was on the poll, and he pretty much ran away with it for the most part. So, Big Show, that's going to be an interesting one to do, I think. And I also did a video talking about Triple H's current run in WWE and how it's going. I'm going to elaborate more on that now that I've caught up on WWE, and I'll have a lot more to say. And I also did a video talking about my distaste for YouTube removing the dislikes. Again, almost a year after the fact. But I felt like I had more to say on the subject, so I went ahead and made another video about it. Me my rambling insanity about something that really doesn't matter all that much in the grand scheme of things, but it was something that should be important to content creators here on YouTube. So if you have not checked out any of those videos, go do so, and of course, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos. And with all of that said, let's jump right into it. Before I jump into the wrestling stuff, one big thing I want to talk about, my book, the Godzilla Monster Fight Record. I got the edit back from my editor, and I'm currently working on making changes to Volume 1. So Volume 1 is nearing completion. I'm still in talks with people about publication, and I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to go the self-publication route or go through a publishing house. We'll see. That's an ongoing process, but Volume 1 itself is nearing completion. I'm actually going to submit my final draft to my editor on November 1st and get one last review, kind of iron out any other messy wrinkles that are in there right now, and then get that thing finalized. I also have a draft for Volume 2, which would wrap up everything, consolidate all the data, and give us all the win-loss records for Godzilla and all the monsters throughout the in-scope films that are going to be covered in the two books. And I'm actually taking some of the feedback I got on Volume 1 and working towards implementing that in Volume 2, so kind of getting ahead of the curve there. For getting Volume 2 ready to submit to editors and go through that whole process again. So a lot going on, very busy process, but it's coming along very well, and I think I'm pretty sure 2023 we're going to get that thing out finally. You'll be able to, at the very least, that thing will be available on Amazon. I can say that definitively, so be on the lookout for that. So wrestling. I guess I'll start with some unfortunate news. Since I've been gone, we've lost, and actually just within the last few days, wrestling legend, the Japanese superstar Antonio Inoki, legendary wrestler, legendary promoter, passed away, which was not a huge shock. He was not in the best of health. The last time I saw him, he did not look great, but it's still sad to lose someone who was so influential and someone who had such a big impact on the business. I think Antonio Inoki is not as well known to American fans, but I think anybody who's really dug deep into wrestling history and is familiar with Japanese wrestling, you've heard the name Antonio Inoki, probably first and foremost before you've heard anybody else's name, anyone who's associated with Japanese wrestling. I think it's very likely. He was a very influential figure and deserves all the accolades and credit that he deserves. And I want to pay my respects to the wrestling legend, Antonio Inoki. Now, right before I started filming this, I got the news that Sarah Lee passed away. Now, Sarah Lee was one of the winners of Tough Enough a few years back. And I'm going to be completely honest, I did not watch Tough Enough. I never watched Tough Enough, going all the way back to the Maven and Chris Nowinski season, the very first season. I just never watched it. Never watched Tough Enough, just never tickled my fancy, and I just could never fit it into my schedule. So I don't have much of a familiarity with who she is or what she brought to the table as far as Tough Enough goes. So I can't really comment on her as a person or as a performer, but it is very sad for someone that young to pass away. For any reason. And when I heard it and I read how young she was, I was shocked by what happened. So, we don't know a cause of death yet, again, as I'm filming this, but whatever happened, it is very tragic, and I wish her and her family and her friends all the best, and send all my best wishes and all my thoughts and prayers and everything else, because it is a very sad and tragic situation. So I wanted to get the bad news kind of out of the way first before I dive into the key stuff. So now, WWE and AEW, a lot has happened since I've been gone, and I'm not sure where to start. I guess I'll start with All Out, because I never really got to do a full review of All Out, because I was pretty much off the grid by that point, getting ready for my wedding, so I didn't really get to talk about it on this channel. If you follow me on Twitter, which, again, follow me on Twitter if you're not already, link is in the description. I said a lot about All Out, and specifically the media scrum that happened afterwards, with CM Punk ranting and raving and enraging the EVPs of the Elite, the Bucks and Kenny Omega, leading to a big backstage scuffle, shall we say, a kerfluffle, as Jim Cornette would say. and it resulted in pretty much everyone involved being removed from television. Now, I already posted my thoughts on Twitter on this, but I'm going to go ahead and restate it here for the record on video. And before I get going, a lot of people are going to think I'm taking CM Punk's side here. I am not. I think CM Punk is kind of a dick, kind of a prick. I think he's possibly bipolar. And even his own DVD made by WWE features a comment from Michael Hayes saying that he's a moody prick. And that's Phil Brooks in a nutshell. So what I'm about to say, I'm not defending him per se, and I'm not necessarily taking his side. What I am saying is that, you look at things like media scrums and interviews and press conferences and things like that. They're typically, and this is across the board, not just a wrestling thing. This is like if you go into pro sports or if you go into, movie promotions or television show promotions, everybody's like, a lot of the people being interviewed feel like they have like guns to their heads or something. It's like, oh yeah, I loved working with this director and this film was a worthwhile experience and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you don't really know if they mean it or not a lot of the time because they just kind of have to toe the line, promote the film and make the money. And then, 6 or 7 years down the road, then they can say what they really thought. But, so typically a lot of these things are pretty boring. So whenever something crazy happens, like Richard Sherman, when, was he with the Seahawks or the 49ers at that point? I don't even remember. I think it was the Seahawks, because that was the Denver Super Bowl where they crushed him. But when they won the NFC Championship, he basically cut a promo ranting and raving against Crabtree, how he's a sorry receiver and all this other stuff. And people was like, what the heck just happened? This guy just won the NFC Championship and he's acting like he doesn't even know the game's over. Stuff like that, it stands out more because it's them being honest. And stuff like that is more memorable because they're being honest and they're not putting up a front or, having to promote anything or towing any kind of company line. And it's kind of an interesting thing in our society where we freak out more when people tell the truth than when they're lying and kind of putting on a friendly face and saying that everything's okay when it's really not. But in any case, that's just, my own little social commentary about how we view things, which is very interesting. But going on from there, I am very perplexed and confused as to why Punk all of a sudden decided to just rant against the Bucks and Kenny Omega and Hangman Page and all this other shit. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. It's like he wasn't even asked about it. He just started going off about something that really had nothing to do with All Out or anything that was going on that day. It was just on his mind. And, all the negative things I can say about CM Punk, I can never call him dishonest. He is brutally, brutally honest. And why did he feel the need to bring up Colt Cabana? Why did he feel the need to bring up all these other things? Why did he? Was it because the fan chanted it at him at a Dynamite beforehand? I have absolutely no idea, but it was on his mind, and he just went off with Tony Khan sitting right next to him. So the whole situation was just a complete freaking shit show. But speaking of shit show, Sammy Guevara and Andrade got into a fight, which apparently Andrade was the aggressor. I don't know all the details about it, but it's like, what in the world is going on there in AEW? It's like, no, somebody needs to rein these people in and get control. And that's kind of the thing, people bashed Vince for being overly controlling and being overly too much of a micromanager, but there's got to be some kind of a happy medium where the guys are allowed to be themselves and come up with their own stuff, and it's not complete and utter chaos behind the scenes. But in any case, Punk said what he said, led to a backstage fight, and the trios titles had to be vacated, and the AEW World title had to be vacated. And right now we have Death Triangle as the trios champions, and Jon Moxley as the world champion, bound to face both Hangman Page and MJF. The MJF title match likely being saved for Full Gear down the road, and the Hangman title match happening in between. It sucks for MJF because he was going to get that big title match with CM Punk, but I guess that's not happening. MJF's big return felt like a big deal at the time, but then got overshadowed by all of this nonsense that's going on. And, is this the last of CM Punk in AEW? Is this, what's the Elite stance going to be moving forward in the company that they helped form? I have absolutely no idea. It's very interesting. Now, if I were Punk and I were, one of the Bucks or Kenny Omega or something, I would get together with Tony Khan. It's like, okay, how can we make money off this? Because right now it's the most interesting thing in AEW, and it's one of those weird cases where the behind-the-scenes stuff is infinitely more interesting than what's on camera. And I'm going to talk about the on-camera product with AEW in a little bit, but it's just, there's a lot of heat there, right? They can make an angle out of that, right? And granted, you're talking to a guy who, back in 2005, when the whole Edge, Lita, and Matt Hardy thing broke out, I was like, dude, they can make an angle out of that. And I felt like they didn't do enough with it when they brought Matt Hardy back and did the whole thing. I was like, they could have done so much more with that. That could have been the hottest story in pro wrestling. Hottest feud. But in any case, I'll talk a little bit more about AEW a little bit later in the video, because I have a lot to say about the anniversary Dynamite and the current state of AEW programming, little things that they could do to fix the programming. But going into WWE, a couple of things going on right now. We have Extreme Rules coming up this Saturday. We also have War Games set for Survivor Series, which I think is pretty cool. I love War Games. My biggest issue with War Games and WWE doing it, the way they're doing it, number one, they can't have blood. And to me, War Games without blood is just not the same. And also, they're doing two of them, which I'm not a huge fan of. It's like, oh, we got to do one for the men and one for the women. I'm like, do you have to? Can't you just pick one? And granted, they have two situations right now. They've got Bayley and her group going up against Bianca, and they've got Walter and Sheamus's groups feuding right now. And so it's like, all right, just pick one of those and do a War Games match. They don't both have to be War Games matches. Personally, if it were up to me, it would be the Sheamus and Walter. I keep calling him Walter. I'm just going to keep calling him Walter because I can't get used to Gunther. By the way, I did see Clash of the Castle, and the match they had was stellar. A nice knockdown, drag out, stiff fest. Loved it. I thought it was great. But anyway, that would be their styles going into a War Games match would be more tailor-made for something like War Games, so I would prefer it if they got it. But to me, it's like you don't need to do two War Games matches. You don't need to do more than one Hell in a Cell match. You don't need to do two Royal Rumbles. Just pick one and just do it, okay? Like, stop this shit. It's just, I go back to my old stance, like, Lockdown ruined everything, because that was the first pay-per-view. It was like, oh, we can do 8 cage matches on one show. And then after they did it, then everybody else thought they could do it, and so everything became an over-gimmick nightmare, and gimmick matches don't mean as much as they used to. It's one of those things that just, I don't like it. But it's still pretty cool that they're doing War Games, and it helps set Survivor Series apart, because Survivor Series, as I've talked about in the past, has really lost a lot of significance over the years, because the elimination matches don't mean anything anymore. The only ones that matter are the ones that have a big storyline stipulation, but you can't just like throw a bunch of people on two sides doing an elimination match and expect people to care, because different landscape, with Raw and SmackDown going every week, that novelty wears itself out super, super thin. It's not the late 80s anymore where that did feel like a big deal. So I think doing this to kind of dress up Survivor Series at least makes that show feel bigger. I will give it that. And other things going on in WWE right now? Well, the Judgment Day are basically the main storyline going on right now on Raw. And the whole, like, Rhea Ripley, Dominic Mysterio thing. And I gotta be honest, I don't care. God, I just don't care at all. And unfortunately, it's really hurting Raw for me, because it is really the main storyline right now. And, SmackDown is the better show because of it. Now, granted, I haven't watched NXT in God knows how long. Every once in a while, somebody will post a clip of Mandy Rose, and that's about all the NXT that I watch these days. Anytime Mandy Rose, it's like, oh, that looks nice. That looks nice. And before anybody comments, like, what about your wife? It's like, yeah, she gushes over Matthew McConaughey. It's fine. It's fair and balanced in that regard. But anyway, I think SmackDown is the better of the two shows right now, especially since Roman's on there more and Sami Zayn's doing his thing. And a lot more good stuff on SmackDown. I also really like Walter as the Intercontinental Champion. So, and I think a lot of the positives that I said about the Triple H run WWE still applies. I think it's still going good. my one criticism, or not necessarily a criticism, but kind of like I was waiting for like that big storyline hook to kind of suck me in. They did it, and that is the White Rabbit, the mystery of who the White Rabbit is, who's working with Karrion Kross, and that whole thing. And pretty much everybody has figured it out that it has to be Bray Wyatt. It has to be Bray Wyatt coming back. And I've said it before, over and over again, Bray Wyatt is probably the most mishandled talent in the last 20 years. When you look at his first run, he should have been the next Undertaker. They squandered it. And then he reinvented himself as The Fiend. That should have become the next Undertaker. He squandered that as well. Or, I'm sorry, he didn't squander anything. WWE squandered it. And it was just mind-boggling how poorly they handled Bray Wyatt, his entire run there. But now that Vince is not in the picture and Triple H is running things, maybe that'll be the creative environment that Bray Wyatt needs to succeed as a talent. So I will be checking out Extreme Rules to see if Bray Wyatt shows up. Wow, 3 WWE pay-per-views in a row. When was the last time I did that? I don't know. But in any case, I have the card for Extreme Rules pulled up. I'm going to do a quick preview for the show. We've got Liv Morgan defending the SmackDown Women's title in an Extreme Rules match against Ronda Rousey. I'll be completely honest here. I don't like Liv Morgan as champion. I don't think she fits. I get what they were going for with her as like the shock winner that gets lucky, but it hasn't worked out for me, and I just don't think she's that interesting. And when you look at all the other women talents floating around the show, she looks so far beneath so many other talents that it's almost laughable that she's carrying the belt. So hopefully Ronda just destroys her and we move on to something else. We've got Edge versus Finn Balor in an I Quit match. I don't care. As I've said before, I don't care about the Judgment Day or any of that. We've got the Brawling Brutes, Sheamus's crew, taking on Imperium, Gunther's crew. I'm just going to keep calling him Walter because that's a better name. But anyway, and this match is going to be a good old-fashioned Donnybrook, which is basically a no DQ match. That name sounds like something I would have expected WCW or TNA to name one of their matches, but in any case, that match should be a lot of fun, I would think. Hopefully we get more of Sheamus and Gunther just clobbering each other moving forward. We've got Bianca Belair taking on Bayley for the Raw Women's title. That's something that feels like it's been built up since SummerSlam, so that's a pretty good match to have. And we've got Drew McIntyre taking on Karrion Kross in a strap match. If Bray's going to show up, it's likely going to be there. And we've got the Fight Pit match, which is basically kind of like the old Lion's Den match that Ken Shamrock used to have back in the day. Some of those matches were really cool, especially the one he had with Owen Hart at SummerSlam 98. Very, very cool match. And I think Riddle and Seth are capable of having a similar... Well, Riddle's kind of tailor-made for something like this, so I think the match could turn out to be really, really cool. And they haven't overdone it with these two having rematch after rematch after rematch, so this one kind of feels a little bit more interesting. We've also got a special guest referee, Daniel Cormier. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, I'm sorry. Not the most knowledgeable guy when it comes to MMA, but he's going to be the special guest enforcer, and and that match is probably going to close, I would think. That would be the main event, looking at the rest of this card. So, not the most stellar card in the world, but there are some interesting things on there that I do want to check out, and, namely the Fight Pit match and Bray's potential return. So, a lot of good stuff going on there. We have Extreme Rules coming up, and hopefully WWE continues their good streak and continues to develop and create things moving forward to make their brand ultimately more interesting, because that's something, intrigue has been something that WWE's been lacking for a very, very long time. So to see them get some consistency back and actually develop something that's interesting, I think it's very good for them, and hopefully they continue to do so moving forward. So, I guess now's a good time to talk about AEW Dynamite. They just had their 3-year anniversary in DC. I was at the very first Dynamite 3 years ago. I did not attend the show because I've been busy with various other things. I wanted to go, but schedules just wouldn't permit. And what is there to say about this show? I had a few takeaways. Now, granted, I could talk about the Sammy Guevara Andrade thing, but that's being talked about to death. And at this point, it's just piling on the fire of the backstage chaos that is AEW right now. But I did have some takeaways from Dynamite. And it wasn't a bad show. I'm not going to sit here and say it was a bad show. It wasn't. But there are certain things that I wish AEW would kind of fix. And kind of tailor and certain things I wish they would stop doing that would make the show better moving forward. It's very simple fixes. And I've said this with AEW many times in the past. It's like, it's a bunch of little things that if you did it better, the show would be so much better. Just as an example, backstage promos being interrupted, they need to stop doing that because they do it like 2 or 3 times a show, and it's their most overused trope. It's obnoxious. It's annoying. I roll my eyes every time they do it, and most of the time it's not done to further a story. It's done to set up a match for next week's Dynamite or for Rampage, and it's like, you see, we built it up. I'm like, no, you didn't. That doesn't count. That's just lazy. So they need to stop doing that. Ring of Honor, they need to figure out how it fits into AEW's landscape. Is it going to be a developmental or a minor leagues program? Is it going to be its own show? And if not, then they need to start unifying belts and start, fixing those issues, because right now it's just a confusing mess to have all the Ring of Honor titles floating around on the show, on a show that already has too many belts. It just makes it look bloated and overstuffed, and it almost makes it feel like every match they have is a title match. It's just, it's ridiculous to me, and it's something that's, again, if it's going to be its own show, and I've had the idea, just turn one of the AEW dark internet shows into Ring of Honor, at least for the time being, until you get something more concrete. And also, I don't even know who's part of Ring of Honor. Like, who are the Ring of Honor guys and who are the AEW guys? That's not definitively set in stone. So it's just, it just makes the show more confusing, and it's more bodies to follow, more titles to follow, and it just makes it look too bloated. So they need to figure that out and get something squared away in that regard. So, what else? The Wardlow cage match is emblematic of some of the issues with how AEW rushes matches to TV. Now, on paper, Wardlow versus Cage is an awesome match to have. Get these two brutes that can do athletic things, let them go out there and just clobber the hell out of each other. And they did, and the match was very enjoyable. The problem is, if I were building it up, I would have waited a few weeks, at least a few weeks, because I think back to when Sid and Goldberg had their match. I believe it was Halloween Havoc 99. And yes, I'm using WCW in 99 as an example of how to do something right, which is just crazy, but that's the world we live in now. I would have had Cage go on kind of a tear and destroy people left and right and build himself up to the title match with Wardlow. Instead, they announced it last week on Rampage. I completely forgot about it, and then they did a quick reminder of it right before the match happened. So it's like there was no build-up, no intrigue, and it's just, all right, throw two guys out there and see what happens. And it severely undercut what could have been a really cool and special match. And I get that their big story right now is that they're going to lead to Joe versus Wardlow. And if that's a situation where they start unifying titles, I'm all for it. You've got rivals Moxley and Jericho as the 2 world title holders of Ring of Honor and AEW. You've got Joe and Wardlow, who are the TV title, kind of the mid-level title holders. You got FTR and the Acclaimed, more on the Acclaimed in a bit, but they're the 2 best tag teams in the company right now, and they hold 2 sets of tag titles, so have them go at it. Start unifying some of these belts, and for the love of God, you do not need 2 sets of trios titles. For the love of God, get rid of those Ring of Honor 6-man tag titles. And but in any case, I get that Wardlow and Joe is kind of like the thing that they want to build up to, and that's probably going to be the pay-per-view match. But you can do things in between and keep stories going. It doesn't have to be like this, segmented, dead set in your ways. We got to get here, so everything we do has to facilitate getting to that point. We'll just fill everything in with whatever random match I want that sounds good in between. It's like, no, you can be a little bit more, you can nurture it a little bit more and be a little bit better with handling it. Like, for right now, okay, Mox and Hangman, they're building up to that title match, but you've got MJF waiting in the wings. I'm okay with that. I think that that's fine. And you could probably do that more across the board. So, just my take. And a few other takeaways. There was the women's segment, that trios match, which they used to... They're trying to give women more promotion on TV, and I think they thought doing this trios match would allow them to stand out more. Instead, it just looked like a cluster of bodies floating around. I do think Willow Nightingale has potential to be to AEW what Bayley was to NXT back in the day, and that is this plucky, likable underdog. I wouldn't rush her to a title match with Jade Cargill at Battle for the Belt, which is the most pointless show that AEW does, because it's their attempt at doing Clash of the Champions in an era where Nitro and Thunder already exist, so what's the point? Clash of the Champions worked best before Nitro. And when Nitro came along, Clash of the Champions was slowly phased out until it faded away in 1997. And then once Thunder came around, it was like, oh, fuck that. We can't do Clash of the Champions at all anymore. So, and it doesn't help that the matches they build to at Battle of the Belts, like, okay, they've done 3 of them, and there have been no title changes. There's been one vacant title one. That's the closest thing they've done to a title change. And the 4th one I'm looking at, it's like, okay, FTR's not losing the ROH titles. Jade's not losing the TBS title to Willow Nightingale. And there's one other title match. Oh, it's Pac defending against Trent Beretta. It's like, okay, he's not losing that one. There's no chance of a title change in any of those situations. So what's the point of doing it? But in any case, I do think that there's potential with Willow Nightingale. But the biggest takeaway from the segment was the confrontation and physical showdown between Soraya, Paige, and Britt Baker. Now, I think that that is the biggest women's match that they could possibly do. And if Paige or Soraya is cleared to wrestle, I think that that is a big match worth doing. And if they can get it on Full Gear, even better. But again, don't just throw it out there on the next Dynamite or on some random episode of Dynamite. You can build up to this and make it an attraction worth checking into. And if you save it for Full Gear, you will have a women's title match that's actually worth paying to see, because it's, oh my God, it's the in-ring return of Paige, Soraya, whatever you want to call her. That's an attraction worth paying to see. And that's something that the women have struggled with. In very rare circumstances have the women's title matches on pay-per-view been like a main reason to check out the show. There was that when Britt finally won the belt in front of a crowd from Hikaru Shida, that one felt like worth checking out, but that was the exception to the rule, unfortunately. So I think it's like, look, you've got this situation right here, Britt and Paige, Soraya. That's something worth saving for pay-per-view. Don't just throw it on a random Dynamite like you did with Cage and Wardlow on this very same episode. And hopefully they recognize that and they keep that moving forward. One other thing I have to say about the segment, Kip Sabian needs to get the fuck away from Penelope Ford. I know that they're married in real life. I'm not suggesting that they get divorced or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying on TV, they need to be separated from each other, because at All Out, their pre-show, Kip Sabian basically debuted his new gimmick and this new persona with the box head, which, by the way, they completely ruined the reveal of that. They did it overseas on a match that almost nobody saw when it could have been a bigger deal on TV. But besides the point, the character kind of caught my interest. And I'm like, dude, this is the most interesting that Kip Sabian has ever been. So maybe they've got something here. And maybe this could turn into something like the new Al Snow or Head. But they haven't really given him any promo time, and they haven't really done anything to define this character or what it is or what the significance of the box is or what he's all about or what he wants. Why is he crazy now? What's going on? They haven't really defined any of that. So instead of being Al Snow and Head, it's kind of looking like Planet Stasiak, for anybody who remembers that short-lived gimmick. It was basically Sean Stasiak acting weird and crazy and talking in rhymes. You think I'm crazy-ack and blah, blah, blah. Another great example would be Damian Demento, a poorly defined crazy character that nobody could tell me what it was. And Kip Sabian needs to go down that road, and I think a way to go down... he needs to not go down that road, and I think a way to avoid that is to give him promo time, let him toy around with this character and better define it, and he needs to get away from Penelope Ford, because having a hot blonde with you... while you're playing this crazy character kind of destroys the image and takes away from whatever it is you're trying to do. So that's my take on the matter. That's the most I've ever talked about Kip Sabian, or probably the most anybody has ever talked about Kip Sabian on any YouTube video. But here we are. So that's AEW Dynamite. Those were some of my big takeaways coming out of this recent episode of Dynamite that got overshadowed by Sammy Guevara and Andrade El Idolo having a little scuffle, as it were. Apparently Andrade wants to quit AEW, which I say, you know what, he doesn't really fit in. I said it from the very beginning when they tried to make a big deal out of him. I was like, he doesn't really fit. He does not fit. But somebody who does fit in AEW, I almost forgot to talk about this. The Acclaim got their big National Scissors Day segment on TV, basically celebrating the Acclaimed and everything that they're all about and winning the tag team titles. They deserved every bit of this. The Acclaimed is great. I'm glad to see them doing as well as they're doing, and I'm glad to see an act and a team that got over on their own, created their own thing, naturally and organically got over with the audience, actually got rewarded for what they did. That is outstanding. That is great, and I'm super, super proud of them. I liked the Acclaim very early on. I was like, I think they've got something with these guys. And thankfully, they finally let them kind of like move forward and develop into something special. And they are now the most over tag team in AEW. One of the most over acts in the company. Thank you very much. And good for them. And hey, they got Billy Gunn over again. Good for them. So I just wanted to congratulate them because I think that they're great and they deserve all the praise and all the attention that they're currently getting. And, maybe we'll get some great stuff from the tag team division with them at the top instead of like the usual, the Lucha Brothers or the Young Bucks. They actually went in a different direction and actually worked out great for them. Even FTR, who I think are great. It was nice to see the Acclaimed get the big title win and also get this big moment where they basically just got to celebrate being themselves. And I always like to see people who do their job well succeed and get rewarded for it. So Max Caster, Anthony Bowens, and even Billy Gunn, congratulations, you did great. So I think that's about it. I think I'm done here. I think I'm good, right? Okay, so I'm going to sign off here. I have to actually go walk the dog. So thanks again, everybody, for watching. It was fun catching up with you guys. If you want to see more from me, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos. And that is all I have for you now. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you all later.